6:30, about a minute past, and we're going to go ahead and get started for this evening. We're expecting one more commissioner to show, but we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm sure Ms. Stringfellow will be along momentarily, but I want to welcome you tonight to our February 2nd Hendersonville Regional Planning Commission meeting. And of course, it's Zoom video conference. And as just by way of opening statement tonight, it's been determined that meeting electronically is necessary to protect the public health, safety, and welfare in light of the coronavirus, and a recording of this meeting will be made available. And by way of shoring up our roll call and our quorum for this evening, and by way of opening statement of agreeing with this tonight, I'm going to ask Lauren to call the roll, and we will record the vote present here, or yes, for all commissioners that are present.
All right, do we have a motion?
We have a motion to accept this opening statement.
Also move.
We have the motion. Who made the motion? I'm sorry.
So moved.
Ms.
Charles.
Longmire made the statement. Mr. Lee seconded it. We have no discussion. All right, call the roll.
Altizer,
Yes.
Bryant McCormick,
Yes.
Hardcastle,
Yes.
Hardwick. Don't believe he's here. Lee,
Yes.
Longmire,
Yes.
Peterson,
Yes.
Silkwood,
Yes.
Stringfellow. Don't believe she's here. And Jenkins.
Yes.
All
So
right.
that means we have 8 commissioners. So that'll be accordingly for the quorum for tonight. And if we have Ms. Stringfield will show up, that'll make it 9. So that'll, for all votes, we have to have 51% of that. So, okay, so move on with our agenda tonight, opening prayer. And I'm going to ask Dr. Lee if you'll just open us in a word of prayer real quick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My internet seems to be going in and out, but I will try to pray. Thank you, Father, for this day that you have given us, for your grace and for your blessing on our nation and on our city. May all we do tonight, Father, honor you and serve the citizens of our city as we demonstrate grace and respect for each other. This I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Okay, we've already done our roll call. We have a quorum present. We move on now to item number 4 on the agenda, which is our public hearing. And tonight we have a public hearing, which is a request by Intrust Tennessee to rezone property from suburban residential medium density planned development SR2 PD to multifamily residential planned development MFR PD, and to approve a preliminary development plan called Anderson Hill. And this property is located on 201 Anderson Lane on the north side of Anderson Lane, as identified by Sumner County Tax Map 159NK018.00. And Lauren, I understand we have some people signed up this evening for this hearing.
Yes, sir. And we also received several public comments via email for this hearing, all of which have been provided in the commissioner's digital packets. And I'm
Just
just
by way of understanding, how many of those did you send each commissioner, so we know if we got the right number?
I've got 31. I think I sent one right around 3:30.
Okay, all right.
And I'll just read through those names real quick, if that's okay,
Go
just so
ahead.
that they're in the record. I have Caitlin Labonte, Judy Pack, Stephen Adkins, Pamela DeMaria, Donnie Gordon, Peggy Underwood, Rob Williams, Andrew Covington, Janice Barbaraki, Lane Williams, Trey Early, Charles Yearout, Karen Maddox, Alyssa Williams, Tim and Jenny Northcutt, Corey and Angie Tucker, Anthony Martin, Phil and Laura Steen, Lauren Mullen, Angela Smith, Tom and Barbara Brennan, P.L. Phillips, James Patterson, Tom and Sylvia Stewart, Miguel Oviedo, Natasha Tice, Marguerite Radigan, Keon Wimsat, Sandra Adkins, Linda Thornton, and Lucy Fox. And all of these comments recommended denial of the proposed project. Also included in the packet was a petition from surrounding neighbors recommending denial of the project as well. These items will be provided to BOMA should the project move forward. And as far as the first to speak tonight, I have Donnie Gordon.
Okay, we're going to recognize Mr. Gordon. Let me just kind of, for those that are watching tonight, how this process works. We have entered those comments that Ms. Beery has mentioned into our record, and all commissioners have received those comments. Now we will hear from those that have signed up for the public hearing who wish to speak. And let me just kind of mention this evening that the way this works is we're going to listen to them speak. Then we will move through the agenda, and later on in the agenda, it'll come up and we will deliberate on this matter as commissioners. And at that point, all speakers that have previously spoken, citizens, in regard to the public hearing, we invite you to watch, we invite you to listen in, but you will be muted because at that point, it will be our time for us to speak with the applicants of this particular submittal and to ask questions and then to make deliberations and make recommendations to the board, mayor, and alderman. So having said that, let's go ahead and recognize our first speaker. And would you please tell us who that is again, Ms. Beery?
Yes, Donnie Gordon.
Mr. Gordon, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. Thank you, Ms. Beery. I thank you so much for the Planning Commission and just the opportunity to be here tonight. Again, my name is Donnie Gordon. I'm a homeowner at 260 Anderson Lane. Just a little bit about myself. I was born and raised here in Hendersonville. Other than a specific span of about 8 years during college and my early professional career, I've been a resident of Hendersonville for my entire life. In 2012, I came home to Hendersonville to raise my family. We spent that first 7 years living off of Maple Drive. And like many of you, I was a benefactor of the strong real estate market that we experienced during the 2010s. We sold our home in 2019 at a 92% increase over our purchase in 2012. So at that time, in December of 19, we moved to Anderson Lane. In the past 14 months, we've experienced an estimated value increase of 7%. So why did we choose to stay in this community? Well, there's lots of reasons, and I'll be happy to talk about the character of this neighborhood. I have a child at Nanny Berry Elementary School, so staying in this school district was an absolute must for us. And the Anderson corridor hosts single-family homes. We'll hear more detail from some of our other speakers tonight about some of those specific things, but across the street from me is the Legends Drive entrance to Vintage Knoll. There's many families that are Nanny Berry Elementary students also in the Vintage Knoll community. On my side of Anderson, which is that south or west, depending on how you want to look at the geography of the road, because there is many winding turns in this road, you're going to see larger estate plots. If I look out my window directly across the street, I can see the proposed Anderson Hill property at the 201 Anderson Lane address. I can see mature trees that are in the 40 to 50-year-old range. On any given day, we've got a variety of wildlife that tracks across this land now. I can see groups of 6 to 12 deer, raccoons, foxes, and some of our smelly neighbors in the skunk family as well. To my left, I have a neighbor that sits on a 5-acre plot. To the right, and moving in a clockwise semicircle rotation, we have acre-plus lots with homes ranging in a value from the mid-300s to over $600,000. The Vintage Knoll homes in the adjacent property all value in the 300s range. So I do have some concerns over the potential impact to our home values. Adding multifamily will have a negative impact on the adjacent homeowners' investments. And while we do live on a busy road, we do enjoy a quiet neighborhood. There is certainly a barrier between the street and us that helps dampen any type of sound pollution that we would have there as well. The front road that would go into the Anderson Hill property, which I have read through the proposal as it's been, I'm sure will be discussed in more detail tonight. It's in the middle of a curve that's very near the Deer Point entrance. Assuming we were to move forward with the 43 proposed units, estimating 2 cars per unit, we're talking about an additional 86 vehicles on the road on any given day in a dangerous curve. Talking about some potential land work. If this project were to move forward, there's a significant site work that would be required. Topographically, this land has a variance of over 50 feet. At its highest level, it's around 550 feet above sea level. At its lowest, it's approximately 494 feet. As it's laid out right now, I believe we need to have more understanding of how these units would be laid out on the property. As it's currently described, I believe there'd either be a need for an influx of large soil or bedrock drilling, or even perhaps blasting. All of these options would require heavy machinery. They would create noise pollution, and at worst, the blasting could impact the foundations of homes throughout the community like my own. And while I'm upstream of the property, my neighbors in Vintage Knoll will have additional runoff water to contend with. I also do have concern about the potential disturbance to the Stark family cemetery that sits on this property dating back to the 19th century, with people who were alive at the birth of our state of Tennessee. So some final thoughts to think about here as well. With COVID, it's forever changed the way that we work, the way that we live, the way that we play. Post-COVID, I and many other knowledge workers will continue to work from home. Previous to this, I commuted to the Nashville Central Business District every day. My commute has gone from 25 miles to 25 feet. I anticipate that the way that we think about how we live, where we live, is going to change significantly in the days ahead. People who would have limited their options to Davidson County, high-income knowledge workers, will begin looking for better cost of living opportunities for their families outside of the Davidson County area. And Hendersonville will be a perfect fit for them. My understanding of this property as it is currently zoned is intended for 12 single-family units. And I would encourage this planning commission to agree with what has already been established as the zoning plans for 201 Anderson Lane. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Who is our next speaker, Ms. Lauren?
Pamela DeMaria.
Okay, Ms. DeMaria, you're recognized. Might want to unmute your mic or have somebody unmute. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Pamela DeMaria here.
I'm
And
sorry,
35
I said that wrong. I apologize. DeMaria, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. 35 of us in Vintage Knoll and one on Anderson Lane submitted a letter to the planning department opposing this rezoning from 12 units or 2.82 units per acre to 44 units or 10.35 units per acre on about 4¼ acres. Vintage Knoll homes are about 4 units per acre. So that'll be a big difference in our next door neighbors if it gets approved. Our concerns are stormwater runoff runs downhill toward our homes, already causing standing water in our yards, potentially affecting foundations and crawl spaces, and causing our creeks to flood. Impervious surfaces and tree removal for 44 units versus 12 could multiply runoff by 3.66 times, causing more flooding. 44 units could bring 88 cars plus delivery trucks to Anderson Lane, Vintage Knoll, and Hendersonville. Anderson Lane is dangerous, hilly, curving with speeding, veering out of lanes and deer crossings. So 88 cars may use Vintage Knoll to get to Anderson Lane. How will Southeastern prevent their complex from driving and guest parking in our subdivision? Vintage Knoll streets are narrow with some parking in streets. Our roundabout is already not used correctly. A 3.66 increase in traffic could equal more accident potential and make the fire department access a concern. It also brings more litter, destroys peace and quiet, jeopardizes safety, and adds to congestion at Gallatin Road and Anderson Lane. Articles show the following about property values. Multifamily units next door may bring down property values because many home buyers will not want to buy a home that backs up to multifamily property. Families may prefer the safety and privacy of a less dense area for their children. Making a neighborhood harder to access due to increased traffic and concern about noise can deter buyers. Too many rental units in a neighborhood of single-family homes can cause property prices to stagnate or drop. And we're not sure if it's rental or home, purchase, but increasing population brings more crime. The higher the traffic density, the higher the air pollution. What is the impact on schools for adding 44 units? If these are rentals, renters are not as vested in community. We could see parties, disturbances, and police being called. The noise with 88 people coming and going at all hours will disrupt our sleep, our bedrooms back up to the new property. How much blasting and rock excavation will there be for 44 units versus 12? Blasting can kick up dust, a health risk for the elderly and those with respiratory problems, and could expose large boulders, which can roll downhill. Can the underlying structure of the land support 44 units plus 88 cars plus delivery trucks? What lies beneath the surface? Is there deep water? A rock in my yard looks like it was in the ocean. And I have a picture here, but I don't know if I can share my screen. Let's see if I do. Let me finish my
Yeah, that'll be fine. You
How
can-
many trees will be cut for 44 units versus 12? Tree roots stabilize soil and prevent erosion. Removal of habitat displaces deer into our neighborhoods and streets, causing a safety hazard. They are already eating our trees and bushes due to lack of sufficient food. Residents and friends of the 44 units may try to sneak into our subdivision's pool, causing potential child safety and liability issues, plus additional pool upkeep expenses for our subdivision. And lastly, how will the historical Stark Family Cemetery be protected during and after construction? How will access be provided? And let's see if I can share my screen.
If you can't, that'll be fine, Ms. DeMario. We trust you. We understand what you were saying.
Okay, it looks like it was under the ocean.
That'd be okay. Anything else?
I'm finished. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ms. DeMario.
Thank you.
Ms. Berry, who's next?
Henry Puckett.
Mr. Puckett, you are recognized.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Henry Puckett. I'm a homeowner in the Vintage Knoll Association.
Yes, sir.
And, while we can't prevent growth and stop growth, we can surely manage it. And I'm just going to kind of go over some of the same concerns that the other two citizens have placed. One of my biggest concerns is the density, and a 33% increase in over what was scheduled for 12 homes now is going to be 43 townhomes. And, again, it all boils down to traffic and traffic flow. I'm really concerned with the traffic flow from this development coming out of the development, not so much on Anderson Lane, but coming down Legends and then going on to Vintage Circle and then coming out to Anderson Lane. We already have a lot of traffic for whatever reason, and I don't know why the reason is, but sometimes they'll go down Legends off Anderson, go through Vintage Circle, and that roundabout there, nobody ever uses that roundabout hardly correctly, cut through and then gets back onto Anderson. And I just see a very large amount of traffic being increased. And we have a lot of children in this community and a lot of young children that go to Nannyberry and Ellis Middle School, and they're playing in the streets. And we already have problems that the Hendersonville Police Department has done a great job of trying to reduce the speed in the neighborhood. But, they can't be here all the time. And we do have a real challenge with that. And this would increase that flow of traffic and the safety for the children. That's one of my bigger concerns. Again, they've mentioned runoff and water, and then during the construction, some blasting concerns, because we've got some homes that are over 12 or 15 years old. And any type of movement could cause some damage in that going forward if it's not managed properly. One of the other things that was mentioned is, if you look at the Maples, they have a large pool that everybody uses. The Vintage Knoll people have a very small pool. When I mean small, I mean small, okay? And we have 119 residents here, and it's already beyond bathing load capacity for our own community. And the enticement of seeing that pool and 43 other homes there, I can guarantee you, regardless of offense, if somebody wants to go swimming, they're going to go swimming, okay? One of the other things, the two items that I really am concerned with is the traffic flow, but the other item is the residents that come into townhomes. Right now, this is a huge rental investment market. Investments in real estate is just at an all-time high. And how many of these are going to actually be rentals and not actually owners? And again, it was pointed out that renters don't have as much care or interest in the community as do actual owners. So I'm kind of concerned and would hate to see Progressive or American Homes for Rent come in there and buy, half the units up. We've already got about 6 homes in our community currently that are owned by American Homes for Rent. And those are challenges at times. So those are some of the real concerns I have about an increased density of this nature, okay? I've seen the plans, the houses look good, but just the concern of the traffic, the density, and what is it going to do, as far as the values and, how many more rentals are we going to look at? So thank you for allowing me to speak and sharing my views on this.
Thank you, Mr. Puckett. Ms. Beery?
Brian Rose.
Mr. Rose, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. My name is Brian Rose. I live at 110 Buckhaven Court. I actually don't live as close to this development proposal as some of the other speakers tonight, but I do drive past pretty much every day and realize that, the two biggest things to me, I would say, are traffic and the addition to all the school, extra people going to the schools. Now, in addition to that, I will also say I'm concerned with the development proposal as it is currently proposed for private roads. The road that's going through there, I guess, is to be maintained by the association there and not by the city. To me, that's not the greatest proposal, because what ends up happening is the burden gets placed on an HOA with 44 units. That requires quite a request down the road when roads have to be redone like that. And to me, it's not residents' responsibilities to be dealing with those types of things. That puts a major burden. And when you're talking about, a lower price type home, those types of homeowners aren't going to be able to afford, if the HOA comes to them and says, hey, we need extra money now to redo our roads in here. That's not going to be something that they will necessarily be able to just pick up and pay for, or, and if the HOA is not diligent in saving the money over that period of time, then, it comes down to getting deteriorated roads. And that's not something that I would wish on any community. But in looking at the traffic scenario, I don't look at just the number of vehicles that may be coming in and out of there, but also I want to point out the number of trips is a really important thing to pay attention to. If you look at the home, you get about 10 trips per home each day. So you basically take 44 and multiply that by 10, that's 440 extra trips that each of those residents, that road is going to experience. And so, with 440 trips, that's a lot of extra chances for accidents with the deer and with all the other vehicles that are coming in and out of there. The driveway itself, like was mentioned prior, is very close to Deer Point. And so, sight distance and visibility may be difficult, especially with all the curves that are right there. Cars going fast along there, especially in the morning time, trying to get to work. So just some of the concerns that I had. I'll echo the other concerns that have already been mentioned. All of them were very well spoken, and I certainly do appreciate their comments. I have some experience in reviewing these types of things. I've worked as a planner actually in my background, and so I see a concern where most of the neighborhood is made up of the lower density, and then plopping in a more than 10 units per acre development in the midst of all of that seems out of place. And we don't have to just accept whatever walks in the door and says, hey, I want to develop this. We can make our own choices as a community and make the right ones. And to develop smart is a lot better than to develop just whatever someone throws at us. It's just better planning. So I just wanted the chance to say a few things, and I'll leave it back to you guys now.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Do we have any more speakers, Ms. Beery?
No, sir. Those are all that signed up.
Okay, so we've heard 4 speakers tonight. We've got 31 comments that have been emailed to all the commissioners. And with that, we're going to declare this public hearing closed. And we're going to move on with our meeting tonight. Item number 3, excuse me. Well, there's actually 2 3s and 4s here. So request for information and assistance. Do I hear any? Hearing none. Additions to the agenda. Any additions to the agenda? Okay, without objection, hearing none. We have the minutes from January 5th. Do I have a motion to accept?
Move to accept.
Mr. Altizer makes the motion. Do I have a second? Second by Ms. Silkwood. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? If you will just signify by saying aye when you hear your name called. Ms. Beery.
Altizer,
Aye.
Bryant McCormick,
Aye.
Hardcastle,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Longmire,
Aye.
Peterson,
Aye.
Silkwood,
Aye.
and Jenkins.
Aye.
That's all 8.
All right, thank you very much. We move on now to item number 6, consent agenda. We have several. Do I have a motion to maybe group all these under one vote on the consent agenda? Move to group.
So moved.
So moved by Ms. Longmire. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second on Mr. Altizer. Okay. These are what we're grouping: the Durham Phase 4, Section 35A, Durham Phase 4, Section 35B, Durham Phase 4, Section 36, Meadows Indian Lake, and Old Shackle Island Cottages. And they have noted on the agenda that everybody's agreed to all staff comments properly put on the consent agenda. We move to group. Motion to second. Any discussion?
Chairman Jenkins,
Yes.
is Keith Free on here?
Yes, he is.
Okay, I just have a question. The developer is requesting an urban growth boundary from the city, and that's for ECD with the state. Is that a conflict of interest for me? Is Keith?
Yeah.
Here, but I don't know that would be a conflict.
I don't believe it. I don't believe that would be a conflict. On which item?
I think it's on all 3 of the Durham farms. The developer is requesting UGB from the city, and that's approved through Economic and Community Development, who is my employer.
Yes. No, I do not. I do not believe that would be a conflict. But I think it's appropriate that you mentioned it. But I don't think that should keep you from voting. but thank you for bringing it up. It's appropriate in that kind of a situation. As Lee shared, if you have that kind of connection, it doesn't mean you necessarily can't vote. You just need to fully disclose that. And that's a pretty distant pretty distant item. There's not really a lot of overlap, but I would see no reason for you not to vote. But it's a very good thing to bring up.
And I would concur, Mr. Peterson, you did right by mentioning that, but given the fact that you are not personally going to benefit whether this is approved or not approved, given the fact that you have disclosed it, we'll leave it up to your conscience whether you'd like to vote for or against or abstain.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We hearing no other items. I mean, as far as discussion on the items we would put on the consent agenda and group together, we'll go ahead and call a vote. Ms. Beery, would you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Altizer,
Aye.
Bryant McCormick,
Aye.
Hardcastle,
Aye.
Lee,
Mr. Lee?
Aye.
Longmire,
Aye.
Silkwood,
Aye.
Peterson,
Aye.
and Jenkins.
Aye.
All right, that's all 8.
Okay, thank you very much. We're moving now to the development plans, which is Anderson Hill. And first of all, let's hear from Grant Green on this. And then if there is a person with Southeastern, we want you to speak after that. And then we're going to open this up to questions. And once again, let me mention what I mentioned before. All those that are watching that have spoken or that are interested in this particular submittal, this is the part where we as the commission deal with this, and commissioners will be obviously permitted to ask questions of the staff or the developer, and we will deliberate and make a determination whether or not we will move to approve and forward to Board of Mayor and Alderman, or that we would move with recommendation not to approve, or we could just move it on with no recommendation. But we will take that up as time rolls on. So having said that, Mr. Green, go ahead and fill us in on this particular project.
Thank you, sir. This is a preliminary development plan proposal for 44 multifamily units located off of Anderson Lane and Legends Drive. The current zoning is SR2 PD, and this was approved for a planned development in 2008 as the enclave at Anderson Lane. This included 12 single-family residential lots, as kind of alluded to earlier with some of the public comments. That development was 2.82 units per acre. The proposed zoning here tonight is MFR PD, multifamily residential planned development. And the proposed density for this new proposal, sorry, I'm kind of flying through it, Lauren. It's 10.35 units per acre. The initial plan had 43 units, which I'd spoken with some folks previously that requested information, and they did go up a unit to 44 on the second submittal that came in mid-month, and essentially it raised the density from about 9 units an acre to 10.35. So it did increase that slightly. The initial, let's see, to the north and west, the property is single family residential and zoned SR2. It's mainly the Vintage Knoll development to the north there. And then to the east is Deer Point, and that's mainly in that little section there. It's multifamily residential, like the proposed development. And to the south is SR1, and that's single family development to the south as well. So So there is multifamily nearby, but it is, there's a mix of things there. And the property to the east, that's all zoned MXR PD. And that was their initial request for rezoning, but it did not meet our current land use plan. That's all essentially grandfathered in. So they've requested the MFRPD instead. So essentially this suburban living land class here, character area, it does allow for, in our zoning ordinance, it specifies that MFR zoning is an appropriate secondary land use. And then the primary land uses would be single family residential. They did show required buffers on this project as well. Street trees and a small playground as the amenity, and that was part of the requirements for the plan development that they would have to submit to in order to get it approved to meet the requirements. They did also submit revised elevations for this. There were initially there was not much brick, and then they have revised that to show the required brick percentage of 66% for multifamily, and they've included that as well. They did show that after the second submittal though, so there's some brick on these, but the rear they did add about 3/4 of that brick. In the last few days, they've submitted that as well to us. So they have met all the staff comments as far as what we had there. And the other issue that we looked at was the open space. It didn't identify the percentage. Well, it identified a percentage of open space, but not really how they arrived at that. Well, they have submitted something to us that verified that for the most part, and I think that's something they plan to include that on the PD if they move forward with this. I think did cover the land use, and because it is MFR, it is allowed in the suburban living character area. It does not require a land use change, as we've seen before with some of our other plan developments and rezoning requests. So that is an appropriate zoning for that land use, for that land use character area. However, it's kind of up to the planning commission and board on whether or not the density and the development is appropriate for that particular parcel.
Grant, before we move on, I'm assuming it's going to be Cal that's going to speak for Southeastern. Let me ask you, with regard to the multifamily residential that's closest by, or the mixed use, do you have a sense of what the density is on that per acre, units per acre?
I had not calculated that. I would say it's fairly close to this. I think a lot of those were fourplex units, from what I recall from the aerial, but I have not tabulated that, so I can't make a determination. I think it's fairly close in density, though. It's.
And with regard to density, with the submittal, with what they're requesting, they're falling within the guidelines of density guidelines, right, for that zoning?
Yes, sir. They're allowed up to 15 units per acre for MFR. So this is under that 15 units per acre for the requirement.
All right. We're going to go ahead and hear from Cal, and then we'll open it up to commissioners. And I'm just assuming Cal's speaking for.
That's correct.
Go, Cal, go ahead. We want to hear from you.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. Cal Gentry with Southeastern Building, agent on the submittal for this property. Grant, I appreciate the presentation, information you provided, and to the neighbors and homeowners that spoke, I really appreciate your comments. They were well thought out, and you brought up some really good points that I'll try to address just in my brief presentation. On this project, we feel like we've got a good product, a good layout. It's an affordable product for empty nesters or first-time home buyers, or just generally people who are trying to move back to town after they've moved away to college or whatnot. That is a market segment that's well underserved in Hendersonville and even in larger part of southern Sumner County that we feel like will allow some of those people to move back into Hendersonville and raise families here. To discuss, if you don't mind, I'll run through some of the main points that the homeowners brought up. On the value side, I believe Mr. Gordon and a few others brought that up. Townhomes of this nature in Hendersonville right now, Sanders Ferry Road and other areas are selling in the $200 square foot range. We're thinking these will sell in the 175 to 200 range, or maybe even a little bit more as well. We feel like from that standpoint, they're smaller units, but from the square footage values, they should help values in the area, or at least prop up everything that's been going on in that area. There were, let's see, on blasting, I think with any development in Hendersonville, the potential for blasting is there. Our intention with the way this site was designed is to climb the hills with the units, to use some taller rear foundation walls and tie the fronts in, and then some retaining walls in the backs where they're needed. So potential for blasting is there. It'll be as minimal as possible because it is an expensive thing to do. We require all of our contractors, based on Mr. Nolan's office, to do pre-blast surveys. We have seismographs placed between our site and the affected areas to make sure that everything's done within limits. But I think blasting is just a part really of any development, whether it's what we've proposed or what was previously proposed on this site. Stormwater and runoff. I actually remember this comment coming up when this was approved back in 2008. And really the thing to say there is my office will work with Mr. Mayo's office in Public Works to make sure that our stormwater quality or stormwater detention areas are large enough to alleviate any additional runoff towards the Vintage Knoll subdivision and anyone else that we're draining towards. I know there may be some existing problems. There may be some ways we can help out with that. Certainly open to looking at that. But we don't intend and cannot legally cause any more problems downstream that have already occurred. So we'll work through that with Mr. Mayo's office. Ms. DeMaria, I believe you brought up, and I think Mr. Puckett also brought up the rental question. We're a for sale home builder. Many of our subdivisions, Saundersville Road and other areas in town, we build to sell, and that's the plan here as well. I know there are a lot of rentals between here and Gallatin Road along Anderson Lane. That's not our intention. Our intention is to build these as condominiums and sell them to those first-time home buyers, move down, those kind of things. Traffic pull use, Mr. Puckett. I think it's valid that you bring that up just due to the proximity. I think that our HOA manager would have to work with yours and your neighborhood as well to make sure that there's not a way for that to happen. It shouldn't. It's not supposed to. Everyone knows that doesn't always go according to plan. So we'll do our best in that regard. And I appreciate you bringing that up. Grant brought up the brick percentage. We had submitted originally 66% on the entire structure. We resubmitted with a minimum of 66% on all four sides of every structure to meet the criteria there. So, and these units are a little more of a traditional design with a lot more brick, I think, than you're seeing kind of in that Sanders Ferry area. Make sure I haven't left anything off. We really feel like this is a good product and it'll really help improve the general area. And when this goes in, it's starting to be sold. If you have any questions, as Grant said, we agree to all staff comments. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right, Cal, let me ask you a couple of questions. No, the first one is I think, did you have some sort of PowerPoint on the I think I saw somewhere a PowerPoint presentation on these townhomes, or did you have a product guide that you wanted to show us at all?
I can, yes, sir. I can bring that up.
Let's just run through that very quickly, if you would.
Whoever the host of the meeting is needs to enable screen sharing, I believe.
Okay, Lauren, can you do that? Or whoever is?
You're all set, sir.
All right, go ahead, Cal.
Okay.
I want to do this because I feel like it's important that we see all the information.
So please let me know when my screen pops up.
Okay, go ahead. We got it.
You guys are seeing it? Okay.
Yeah.
This is just a pattern book that we sent to the planning office after we made our initial submittal to help clarify some of the questions and concerns they had. Just a little, I think the planning department will, if they haven't already, they'll email this to you. Just a little bit about us as a developer. We've been developing subdivisions in Hendersonville for many, many years, a couple of decades, getting close to 3, I think. General aerial map, proximity to some of the other communities. You can see the Deer Point product here to the east. This is, and Grant, I haven't calculated it to the decimal point either, but this was designed to be an extension of the same density that was over here, just with some newer upgraded type units. The cemetery, I don't think I touched base on the cemetery from Ms. DeMaria. In our evaluation of the cemetery, some of the most recent graves, I think, are still from the late 1800s. I didn't notice any newer than that, but our goal is to protect that, fence it, clean it up, and probably make it accessible, certainly, but protect it from kind of misuse. And that's in this area close to Legends Drive. We had a similar situation in our Stonecrest community on Saundersville Road. You want to ride out there and see what we did. We provided the 4-rail horse fence to close off access, protected the graves. It's mowed and maintained by the homeowners association. But we want to be very cognizant of taking care of those graves and leaving that as a piece of the community. Entryway, very similar to what we installed at the rear entrance to the Hunt Club on Shoot Lane. You see some fencing, some amenities here. The elevations, this is the updated elevation showing more brick on the rear side. The sides are brick to the gables. The front, we've left a little bit of material there, just give some variation. Planning asked for the actual percentages, so they're listed in there as well. They're all well above the requirement. There's me and Mr. Lucky if you need to know what we look like. And then that just kind of takes us to the plan. That's really it. I just wanted to have that out there. Okay. One other thing, Mr. Puckett mentioned traffic through the subdivision. I think there's definitely a potential for that. And if Mr. Mayo's office would like to, we can pursue, if Mr. Nolan's okay as well, restricting turns to left turn only on the Legends, except for emergency services. We can do something with the entrance there to force that traffic back to Anderson so it's not going through the neighborhood. That's pretty much it, Mr. Jenkins.
Thank you. The thing that I'll go ahead and begin the process here, and we can go on and exit that sharing screen. There we go. This might be a question for Rick, or it could be a question for Cal, but what kind of road improvements are we requiring, especially on Anderson Lane? I think that the valid point here, and you know, my record through the years with Southeastern, I think I've been pretty much proponent of their products. They do good products, but I just have some concerns about this and that turn on Anderson. And I was looking at the plan. Are there any required road improvements, or is there engineering wise, what could we even do to mitigate possible accidents there by getting in and out of that subdivision? And I realize it's not as big as some of the submittals that we've had in the past, but 44 homes, 80 cars potentially coming out on Anderson Road, that's dicey, that on that curb. So can you kind of fill us in? Are there any road improvements scheduled? And what are we requiring the developer to do since it is a planned development?
I talked to Sarah, our traffic engineer, a little bit about this earlier. We should have time to look at it in tremendous detail. But she's in the process right now along this stretch of Anderson Lane, some other areas, doing a signing study, some signing plans actually, about, you've probably seen them, where speed limits, curves ahead, different things to do to try to calm the traffic down, slow the traffic down a little bit, just in general, not just for this development. We normally, on something like this, would, as far as road widenings or anything like that, unless it's a tremendous amount of traffic and turn lanes, we probably wouldn't get into that. I know Sarah did mention that we'd have to look at during the final design, but there with some vegetation trimming, they could possibly reach the site distance requirements coming out of there. But there's no way to tell from the plan we got now, but during design, we would look at site distance requirements and make sure that those were obtained and at that time. But basically, other than that, as far as access, but as far as widening the road, we would require pavement in lieu. We normally require sidewalks, curbs and gutters, just in general, or pavement in lieu for future use of that, those amenities to go onto there. But other than that, that's kind of what we know about it right now.
Okay, thank you. For me, I'm kind of, as I said to begin with, just a little torn on this one. Once again, not because of Southeastern, but simply because I really do feel like that the trade-off we would be getting by going for this zoning, which by the way is a secondary use of suburban living. But I've got some concerns about that traffic right there in that curb. And so I am open to hearing other commissioners and talking and do what we do best. So with that, open up to commissioners, questions. Ms. McCormick.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. For Mr. Green, do we have drone footage?
No, ma'am. The gentleman that we had doing the drone footage no longer doing that, so we did not obtain that. There is some significant slope on the some fair slope on the property, but no, ma'am, we do not have the drone footage. We do have the aerial though. That's somewhat helpful.
Okay, my second question is, do we have our map that shows the exact, I know you kind of hit it in your presentation, but I'm looking for more precise zoning in the areas surrounding. Do we have that?
Yes, I think Lauren might be able to pull that up. The zoning map, it is what we've provided is it's not, it does show the general area. However, there's Main Street to the north there, Galton Road. I'm sorry, and then there's Anderson Lane to the south of that property. It shows kind of winding around through there, but generally all the Maples area, that is all MXR, mixed residential, but the majority of that is single family. So essentially all those lots that you see up in the north east of that's all single family. The Deer Point development is kind of in that just to the east and that immediate east area right there. So there's quite a bit of single family around that property.
And so just to confirm, because traditionally we have a map that has the colors of the specific, that Deer Point area where the cursor is, that area is zoned as what?
That's MXR. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then naturally Vintage Knowles area is SR2.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And the yellow directly across the street from it, what is that zone?
It's all a single SR1, a single family residential.
Okay. So the only mixed use or multifamily is over at where Maple Way is over there?
Yes, anything that's close to that property, it's all Deer Point that's multifamily. I think there may be some Maple Way down there. I'm not sure what type of development that is down there, but that's a fair good ways away from this.
Okay, that's my questions. Thank you.
Yes,
thank you, Ms. McCormick. Are there any other questions from commissioners? Mr. Lee.
Yes, just a
Okay, I think you kind of.
few comments, Mr. Chairman. First, quality of their comments again tonight, that's been noted, but I do appreciate how respectful they were, how organized they were, how informative they were, and what they presented, as well as the emails that we received. And I know we've all had the opportunity to review those. I do have some concerns about the traffic issues as have already been addressed. And I just want to say one thing about blasting. I think that's a concern that many residents have, and it's a conundrum for the developer, but for the residents, it's a conundrum as well. Because the limits on blasting were established several decades ago, and they may have been really acceptable at that point in time when the density was not nearly as high, but it can be in an acceptable range and your house can still shake. And I do have some concern about that. Now, I think we've got a quality developer. I don't think there's any question about Southeastern and Cal and Mr. Lucky. But I do have those concerns. Drainage was mentioned several times. I'm not sure that we have been able to indicate that has been taken care of or would be taken care of. And my last point that I would simply make is I know we are running out of developable space in Hendersonville. And normally when you have limited options, you look for what is unique, what is high end, what is a real value adding that low cost housing or more reasonable cost housing is not good for our city. But I think situated where it is, it's, I wouldn't call it a fish out of water, but maybe we're trying to put a largemouth bass in a goldfish pond. I mean, I kind of see that. So those are my concerns.
Okay. Ms. Silkwood, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'd like to echo my fellow commissioners' concerns about traffic and everything that Charles Lee said. And just, I drove out there today just to get a look at the property myself. And, when you drive around Vintage Knoll, you're looking at single family homes, and we've seen a lot of the photos that some of the neighbors have sent from flooding. And you can see how flooding might be a big issue because this property that they're calling Anderson Hill is really on a hill. I mean, there's quite the slope there. So, I'd like a little more information. I know this is just a preliminary plan, but a little more information about how this stormwater is going to be managed with this major increase in impervious surface. I mean, basically there's nothing on that property now, just grass and trees and whatnot. And I also will say, I feel like, and this is just eyeballing it in the plan, but the stormwater management area that's right by the entrance on Legends Drive, that is not a large space from the road to where the existing cemetery starts. So this stormwater management area cannot be that big. In addition, I have concerns with a stormwater management area abutting that historic cemetery. So anyway, I'd just like to echo my fellow commissioners' concerns with all of those things. And, if somebody would like to expand a little bit on the stormwater management plan, if there is more detail to that plan at this point, I'd like to hear that as well.
Okay. In the form of a question from Ms. Silkwood, Cal or Rick, would you like to address the stormwater?
Mr. Mayo, I'll go first if you don't mind. Ms. Silkwood and others, stormwater is going to be managed in two directions. One is, as you indicated there, next to the cemetery. As that is actually taken just a small portion of the site that travels west towards Legends Drive. When we build those, we typically install smaller berms on the low side rather than trying to excavate into the hillside. I think it'll fall kind of into where and kind of a join and become part of the landscape buffer in that area. The main stormwater system that drains towards the larger drain that goes through Vintage Knoll, if you have the site plan available to you, is in the northeast corner. And really that whole north line up there, the previous plan had shown kind of that whole area has been reserved for stormwater. We felt like we could handle it in a little bit smaller area or a duplicate area either side of that rear building. But again, handling it with more berms and less cut if possible. But as you also stated, because it's a preliminary plan, we haven't run all the numbers on it. If we get to the point in the civil plans and we need more space, we will have to adjust our plan to provide the space necessary to protect the downhill homeowners.
Okay, thank you. I just know I've seen several photos, and having driven out there today, I can see how, you know, an addition of so many townhomes with so much parking and roadway would really create even more of an issue with flooding than the Vintage Knoll neighborhood is already dealing with, apparently. So that is one of my major concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Silkwood. Thank you, Cal. Rick, did you want to respond, or is that pretty much?
He pretty much summed it up. We have a stormwater detention requirements in the city where for the 25-year storm, they're required to submit calculations showing these detention ponds holding back water and releasing it no more than the pre-development rate for at least a 25-year storm, and being able to pass a 100-year storm without flooding anybody out. So obviously there's no details. That's handled during detailed construction plans, but we require all the calculations and all the design of those. That's generic across the city.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners wishing?
I got a question.
Mr. Hardcastle.
Cal, what did you say about the entrances earlier when I believe Rick was talking? Which entrance did you say you would limit?
So Mr. Hardcastle, we're anticipating our main entrance being there off Anderson Lane, and Mr. Puckett brought up a good point about tying into Legends Drive. That's intended to be our second entrance, and we even earlier today had looked at possibly a left turn only on the Legends there to just kind of alleviate some of the traffic going back into the neighborhood. It's a much shorter route going out to Anderson and not going through Village Knoll. But that was our intention. Main entrance on Anderson, secondary access really for fire service coming on the Legends.
Well, it sounds like a majority of the commissioners seem to have an issue with the traffic on Anderson Road Anderson Lane as opposed to Legends Drive. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what I heard. And, you know, to kind of elaborate a little bit further on what Mr. Mayo said, he gave us the option to improve Anderson Lane or to make a payment in lieu of. We're fine doing either one of those. And we offered the payment in lieu of along Anderson so that if the traffic engineer's study comes back and says, hey, if we do these things in general on the broader Anderson Lane corridor, it'll improve traffic flow. That money could be used for those improvements, hopefully immediately. But when it comes down to it, if it's better to make some improvements on Anderson in front of our site, we'd be happy to do that. And could look at limiting access left and right in, right out, something like that, if Mr. Mayo feels like it's more appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hardcastle, you still have the floor?
I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Any other commissioners? Ms. Longner. You might want to unmute your mic. I'm sorry. Got it?
Think so.
You're good. We hear you.
I drove out by this property, and of course I've lived here for many years. I've seen how the people drive, especially in the morning and going home when you're in a hurry. I talked with a homeowner that lived right on Maple Drive, and Dale. And she says that already the traffic is so heavy at times in the morning that she cannot back or drive out of her driveway because cars are from Anderson Lane all the way over to Maple, just a straight line. People are going to look for different ways to go to where their destination is, and however they think they might get there a little bit quicker. Anderson Lane has always been hilly, curvy, narrow. And if you go in the evening, it's a little bit scary because it's kind of dark. No lights there. So that's one concern that I have when you put that many more cars in that space. And I do think the runoff we've seen people that have had water come right up to the edge of their house where it was going to come in that had not had that problem previously. So it's certainly something that is a concern for homeowners in that area. So that's my thoughts I wanted to share.
Thank you. Any other commissioners wishing to speak?
Yeah,
Yes,
Chairman Jenkins,
Yes.
I've got a question for Grant concerning the cemetery.
Sir.
Do they require special zoning on their own, and how does that affect development? I just was concerned.
Yes, sir. It doesn't have a special zoning classification. There's really cemeteries, I think, are regulated more by the state. I'm not sure actually if it's that's a good question. In terms of development, though, we have ensured in the past that there is that is like essentially set aside and not developed on, but we don't really have any restrictions or anything that I can recall about cemeteries specifically. Being this is a historic cemetery, I understand. I think the developer had been in contact with the family about this, from what I understand, about because essentially I think one of the things I discussed with him was providing a parking space or something up there for the family or something like that. But I think from what I understand, the family is not. I may let Cal speak more to that, but no, in terms of regulations though, and zoning, it's essentially falls under the typically a residential zoning such as this.
Mr. Chairman.
Hold on, Ms. Longmire. Mr. Peterson, did you, before I come to you, any more questions from you?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Ms. Longmire.
Yeah, because, I've sold real estate and still do for many years. And there's a number of these little family cemeteries around Hendersonville, some of them in areas that you wouldn't ever think would be there. And there is some kind of regulation, and it may be from the state, but you really can't do anything about a cemetery. Can't move the grave sites or change the stones if they're there. So there is a regulation, and I'm not sure who looks after it or comes after you if you violate.
All right. Any other commissioners? Okay, well, here we're coming to the part of this discussion now where we need to decide what we're going to do, commissioners. From my standpoint, first of all, I would reiterate, and I think this was mentioned earlier, but our decision would never border or hinge upon whether these homes would be for sale or for rent. Cal has most graciously said that they're going to be for sale properties, but that cannot be a reason to approve nor deny. Or recommend denial or recommend not approving based upon whether they are for sale or for rent. We know this. And so I want to make that stipulation. The other part, this is just for me. The question being, is there a substantial reason to cross the threshold and say we need this particular classification? Once again, SR2 being the predominant zoning right now, 12 homes could be erected on that site, which, by the way, if someone wanted to come in and put a nice subdivision there, I'm thinking about what's happened on Sanders Ferry Road with that particular peninsula subdivision out there with acreage that's maybe a little bit bigger than the 4, but it's turned out to be something pretty special. What could be done within the SR2 classification, not to make starter homes, but maybe a little bit better on that Anderson Hill and make it really a showplace. The other thing is, for me, is, like I said, I feel like that Southeastern, we have had a long history with them, and there's no problem with what they produce, what they do. But for me, I'm just not sure I'm ready to go down this road of saying that I'm ready to commit this particular piece of land to a multifamily residential zoning. That's just me speaking as a personal commissioner. So I would take any other comments from commissioners, and then somebody at some point, we need a motion either to recommend approval or a motion set forward that would recommend not approving. So so we'll go from there. Any other commissioners like to share your thoughts on this? And then maybe at some point we get a motion here relatively soon. So any other commissioners?
Would it be appropriate for me to speak again?
Sure, Mr. Well, let's make it one more comment. Then I really would like to get commissioners' finals on this, and then we're going to go ahead and make a motion one way or the other. So yeah.
Okay, I'll be quick. One thing about sight distance and traffic on Anderson Lane, my engineer's done a preliminary evaluation and feels like we will be okay on sight distance. That said, if this rezoning moves forward and we get to the point with Mr. Mayo and it is unsafe to access Anderson and it doesn't work coming out on Legends, the project can't proceed at that point. And if we wouldn't be able to do the project just based on it being unsafe once we get to that point with the civil design. And speaking to the 12 home design, that was approved back in 2008. There's been a lot of opportunities to put that in since that time. The requirements for development in Hendersonville they're pretty high, and they make things look really good and really nice. And it's difficult to develop that few lots in this type of area with the site characteristics. So I think that's why you're seeing a higher dense presentation or proposal at this point rather than the 12 homes that were originally approved there. So again, I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. Other commissioners? If not, let me just ask, what's your pleasure? Anyone have a motion to make or sense what we'd like to do here? Mr. Lee.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Not that we have a proposal that is not acceptable, but I think part of our charge is to what is in the best interest of the city and that will move the city forward. And in that spirit, I'm going to move that the proposal be denied.
I'll second that.
Second.
Okay, we have Ms. Longmire and Ms. Silkworth.
Testing the will of the commission.
Okay. Let me just check with Director Free as to parliamentary inquiry here, proper kind of motion.
Yeah, I think we can do a denial if no one is making a motion to approve. You could do a motion to deny. I think it would be good in the motion to deny, Dr. Lee, to mention at least a few reasons or findings of fact of why why there'd be a negative recommendation.
Okay. So we have a motion, a second, and just for clarity, Dr. Lee, would you like to kind of?
I think I got us in this situation once before on a negative recommendation. So I would like to withdraw my motion.
Okay.
If that's possible.
That is possible.
And then we can still test the will of the commission with a recommendation that it be approved.
Okay. And so would the appropriate ones that seconded Mr. Lee's motion to begin with, are you willing to withdraw your second?
Yeah, I'll withdraw my second.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Mr. Lee, that's withdrawn. If you would now make your motion.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Testing the will of the commission, I move that the proposal go forward or be approved.
Okay. Do you have any findings of fact that you would like to put with that? Probably not. Okay.
Yeah. I've looked over the conditions, and it would be maybe difficult for me to be able to say that all of these things were true.
Okay.
I'm just looking for a way for us to see how to go forward without lengthy statements of justification that could be argued one way or another.
Okay. All right, so we do have a motion. Do we have a second to approve? Hearing no second, that motion dies for lack of a second. Okay,
Yeah.
so at this point, because the motion dies for lack of a second, I believe that would imply, Keith, that the commission does not want to move this item forward.
It would be. I think since there wasn't a second and it's dying for a lack of second, just for clarity, now I think it would be okay if someone wanted to make a motion with findings of fact on denial. I think that it would clean it up, because this is a recommendation that's going.
Yeah.
So it would just give them better clarity.
Okay, so a recommendation not to approve would be, rather than denial.
Yes.
Recommendation not to approve, and then we can put the findings of fact on there. Then that would leave it open to the Board of Mayor and Alderman,
Right.
whether or not they want to take it up or not.
Yeah, and it's really two things. It's when you're sending something to BOMA, you have two choices. It's either recommending approval or recommending denial. They're really they're in the middle box on that.
All right. All right. So, Mr. Lee, let's go forward with the other motion that you had, and let's put some findings of fact in there as well.
Okay. All right. I would move that that the proposal be denied.
Okay. And findings of fact being?
Based on the issues that were addressed in terms of traffic concerns, based on issues of drainage that has yet to be fully determined, that could be done. The fact, as I look at these three conditions that we always have to say that a change, that it would not have any adverse effect upon adjoining property owners, I can't say that this proposal would not have a negative effect, nor could I say that it is in the overwhelming public good or welfare of the community to do that. So I make that recommendation.
All right. Thank you very much. Do we have a second to that?
Second.
Second, David.
Okay, Ms. Silkwood got it first. So we have a motion to second. Now, is there any discussion by commissioners on the motion? Okay, hearing none. We have a motion on the floor to deny, and it's been properly seconded. Findings of fact have been presented. Lauren, do you have all those written down, by the way?
Yes.
Okay. And hearing no other comments, we will go ahead and call the roll when you hear your name called. If you vote for the denial, you will vote yes. If you're not voting for the denial, if you want to, then you will vote no. Okay, thank you.
All right. Altizer,
Aye.
Bryant McCormick,
Yes.
Hardcastle,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Longmire,
Yes.
Peterson,
Peterson?
Yes.
Yes.
Silkwood,
Yes.
and Jenkins.
Yes.
All right, that's all 8 for denial.
Okay, so and let me just say once again to our applicants who we esteem very highly in this community, we love your work. We love what you do for our community, and this vote tonight in no way reflects what our value is for you and your company, Mr. Lucky, and what you guys do. And hopefully we could come back to this and maybe put our thinking caps on and put something in there that really would be incredible there. So having said that, commission moves that recommendation forward, and we're going to move on with the meeting. Now we go to
Thank you,
site
and I
plan.
appreciate y'all's time.
Thank you. Thank you, Cal.
Thank you, Cal.
Site plans. So now we have Baker Roofing. Timothy, that's you.
Thank you, Chairman. The subject of this application is a waiver request for Baker Roofing, which is just wrapped up construction on their site on Tennessee Way. They have erected a galvanized chain link fence wrapping around the back side of their property. Because this lot is zoned heavy commercial, the zoning ordinance requires that the fence be vinyl coated and not galvanized, not just the raw chain link. To the north, the west, and the south of this property all have extensive runs of non-coated chain link, which is allowed in industrial zones. Because Baker Roofing because they're surrounded by all that non-coated chain link, they're requesting to be allowed to continue with their uncoated chain link fencing. The fencing, like I said, it's around the back of the property. It's pretty well isolated from street view. The short section that faces Tennessee Way, where their gate is, they are proposing that to be vinyl coated. So they're requesting a waiver for the remainder of that yellow highlighted section of fencing to be non-coated.
Okay, so they're agreeing with all staff comments, but they are still requesting a waiver for that particular backside, and they're willing to make improvements along the frontage to Tennessee Way.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Mr. Whitten?
That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody here from Baker Roofing?
Yes, sir. Representative of Baker Roofing with Greenlit Design, Zach
Okay.
Baker. I'm here to answer any questions.
Go ahead. We'll hear from you very quickly. Thank you.
Mr. Green presented it pretty well, so I'm just here to answer any questions any of the commissioners might have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions now for Timothy or for Zach? Okay. They are agreeing with all staff comments. I don't want to rush anybody, but if we'll move the meeting forward. They are agreeing with all staff comments, and they are requesting a waiver on the back side of the property, and they're willing to make improvements on the front side facing Tennessee Way. So we would be granting a waiver for that portion. Am I right, Timothy?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So we'd be granting.
Chairman, I'll make a motion to accept the waiver to give the chain link fence on the other three sides, the side facing the road, to be vinyl coated.
Second.
Got a second? Who seconded that? I'm sorry. Ms. Silkwood. We have a motion to second. Do we have any more discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Beery, would you call the roll? When you hear your name called, vote aye if you're for it, no if you're against it.
Altizer,
Aye.
Brian McCormick,
Aye.
Hardcastle,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Longmire,
Yes.
Peterson,
Yes.
Silkwood,
Yes.
and Jenkins.
Yes.
All right, that's all eight.
Okay, now we're moving on to the Camel Car Wash site plan, and that's Timothy as well. Mr. Whitten.
That's Campbell Car Wash will be located next to the racetrack fuel station on that West Main Street in Rockland Road. This is the third time y'all have seen this project. The preliminary development plan was approved last year. The final development plan was approved last month by BOMA. So now you have before you the site plan. It is in substantial compliance with the final development plan. The applicants have agreed to all staff comments. And if you have any questions about the plan, I'll be glad to answer them.
Okay, Ms. Silkwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. You know, one thing I've disliked about this project from the very beginning, I don't like the idea of the vacuum hoses hanging down off of the posts and off of the canopy. I think that makes for a very cluttered look. And maybe someone can answer why that was chosen as opposed to, for instance, I hate to name a competitor, but Mr. Car Wash on Main Street in front of Kroger has, I assume they kind of go underground, but they don't hang from above, creating a very cluttered look. So I don't know if that's Mr. Witten or maybe somebody from, the car wash company could answer that. But really, if I could change anything about this, that would be one of the main things I'd like to change about this project. So somebody, somebody wants to kind of give some detail on that, that would be helpful.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Silkwood. Let somebody try to answer her question. Timothy, do you want to handle that, or is there a representative from Camel here? Camel Car Wash.
I think
This
it
is
should be represented
Reed Howe,
by
Mr. Jenkins. Hey,
Camel Car Wash to answer that.
Okay, who's speaking? I'm sorry, I don't see your face. Are you just on the
I'm
phone?
sorry. This is Reed Howe.
Reed, okay, please.
Camel Express. Yes, sir. The one reason that we opt to do that versus the underground, actually, there's several reasons. The primary reason being the suction on the vacuums is not as good when you run them underneath the ground. Also, the vacuum hoses, when you have the vacuums on the ground, like at our competitors, they tend to get really dirty. People step on them, they get run over. There's just it's just not a clean. It's not the cleanest way to do things, and that's why we at Camel Express prefer to hang them from the actual canopies, and it gives it a nice, neat appearance versus when you put them on the ground, they end up all over the place, and it's really difficult to manage. But more so, it's unsightly and unsanitary. So for those two reasons, we choose to bring them off of the canopies. I'm not sure if that answers or addresses the question or not.
Well, thank you for that. And I'm sure I'll be a customer of yours as well, but I'm currently a customer of Mr. Car Wash. And I find that they have attendants there that if someone does leave the hose laying about, they rush over and roll it back up. And I just think from an aesthetics point of view for the city, and especially as you come into the city from Madison, anything we can do to sort of make everything seem very clean and very crisp, that would be my preference. I don't, I'm not going to die on the hill, but, I just, that would be my preference. I think it's a cleaner look overall. So thank you for your explanation.
Thank you, Ms. Silkwood. Any other questions? Ms. Longmire?
Yes, I'd like to ask a question about the cost of installation, because everything, of course, bottom line is money when you're developing something like this. So is there a difference in how much it would cost to put the vacuum hose underground as opposed to whatever is involved to hang it from the post?
Mr. Hawk?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the question. It's much cheaper to run the vacuum hoses under the ground. We have a system that my partner actually has his company has a patent on these the vacuum systems, not necessarily the hoses, but the above ground system. So it's a silo that separates all of the trash and just makes it a little bit more efficient. But as a general rule of thumb, it's typically twice as expensive to run the vacuums above the ground and over the canopies in the manner that we have chosen to do so. So it would be a lot cheaper if we ran the hoses underneath the ground.
Interesting.
Okay. Anything else, Ms. Longmire?
No, that's it.
Thank you.
Surprised.
All right. Any other commissioners? Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. I have a question for Mr. Hawk. How many employees do you plan to hire for the car wash?
For any given location that we have, we'll have at least 10 full-time employees. We typically have 5 on the clock at any given point, but anywhere from 10 to 15, just depending on the size of the site.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Any other comments? All right. Let me go back. Have we already got a motion to approve on this, or we're waiting on a motion? No motion yet?
No motion yet.
Okay, I want to make sure. All right, we have a motion to approve with all staff comments. Do we have a motion for that, please? Mr. Lee makes the motion.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
We have a second. Anybody want to second that motion?
I will second.
Second, okay. Thank you, Mr. Altizer. Any more discussion? All right, if hear your name called, if you are inclined to vote yes on the approval of the site plan, vote yes. Otherwise, vote no. Ms. Berry.
Altizer,
Aye.
Brett McCormick,
Conflict of interest?
Thank you.
Hardcastle,
Yes.
Lee,
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Okay.
Longmire,
Yes.
Peterson,
Yes.
Silkwood,
Yes.
and Jenkins.
Yes.
All right, that is 7 and one conflict of interest.
Okay, very good. That passes. Moving on now to Tractor Supply, and that's Mr. Whitten again.
Thank you. Tractor Supply is located at the corner of West Main Street and Center Point Road. They have an existing outdoor sales and display area located on the north side of their building, between it and the adjacent church property to the north. Within that enclosed area, they are proposing to erect a greenhouse, which the greenhouse will be covered with opaque polycarbonate panels, which are sort of translucent and allow the light to pass through to the garden center below it or inside of it. Also within that enclosed area into the rear of the proposed greenhouse, they're also proposing an enclosed feed room. Their initial proposal, the feed room was to be clad in metal. They have since changed that, so that will those exposed sides will now all be EFIS, which is a compliant material. The polycarbonate panels on the garden center, that's neither an approved material nor a prohibited material. Obviously, to have a greenhouse, you have to have some sort of material like that if it's not going to be glass in order to serve that function. They have agreed to all staff comments, and if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. I will just point out that photo that Lauren just put up there. That's of a different location. They will not have the fuel tank that you see there to the right will not be there. That's going to be located around to the back of the garden center. So I would point that out.
Okay, thank you. All right, any questions for Mr. Whitten? Or if there's they're agreeing with all staff comments, but anybody with Tractor Supply, any questions for them? All right, hearing none, do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Ms. Silky,
Second.
second by Mr. Altizer. Any more discussion? All right, you hear your name called. You vote for the motion, vote yes. Ms. Berry.
Altizer,
Aye.
Brett McCormick,
Aye.
Hardcastle,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Longmire,
Yes.
Peterson,
We didn't hear you, Mr. Peterson, I'm sorry.
Peterson,
Your mic's muted, I think.
Yes. Sorry.
Silkwood,
Yes.
and Jenkins.
Yes.
All right, that's all 8.
All right, that is approved. Move on now to staff reviewed projects, and we've got quite a few: Hazel Path Commons, Exhibit Revision, Parcel 3, Messinger and Sill Properties, Resub Lot 2, on the Camel Car Wash final plat, Camel CW final plat, Millstone phases 1 through 12 FDP amendment. And then there are staff reviewed projects pending: Connor subdivision, underground, Free Hill Properties, parking lot addition, Hearst warehouse exterior remodel, Jackson property final plat, Osram Continental USA liquid nitrogen system installation site plan, PNC ATM addition at 204 Anderson Lane North, Stadium Townhomes revised entrance, and then of course the Triangle resub lot 2 Shackle Wash and Shine on their site plan. And no staff, no actions needed on those. On other, there's nothing. And then planning director comments. Mr. Freed, do you have anything to say?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be extremely brief. There's a lot of activity going on, a lot of very high volume of activity that the planning staff has been overseeing. Also, we're probably going to have a pretty big March meeting. It's going to be on March the 2nd. At this point in time, we don't know if it's going to be Zoom or if we're going to be in person. We'll have to wait and see if the governor extends the Zoom, the ability to Zoom through March. But once we know that, we'll let everybody know that as soon as we know that for sure. We are looking in the coming months when we have the opportunity to go back to meeting in person, and so we'll be looking for that opportunity when we can do that. But everything's going well. The staff is doing a tremendous job. They're doing a very good job. I shared today in a department head meeting this afternoon how well the staff is doing in being responsive to the public. I had since last Thursday, had 3 people that I had talked to that had talked to a variety of our staff members and spoke very highly and was commended them on how quick they were to respond and how thorough they were in answering questions. So I'm very proud of the staff, and they continue to do a tremendous job. And that's everything that I had, Chairman.
And thank you, Keith, for your leadership and the staff for all that you do. Great meeting tonight. And who's not here?
Miss Stringfellow.
Miss Stringfellow. We had a blank there for a minute. Started Darlene, but Miss Stringfellow's not here. So Ms. McCormick, do you have a motion for it?
I do. Mr. Chairman, I move that we stand adjourned at 8:09 p.m.
Thank you so much. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second? Okay, I hear it. All in favor say aye. Aye. We are adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.